What's that? Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Expanding the Zone. I'm Shayne Combs here, joined as I always am by my brother Matt, and I'd like to welcome you all in, however you may be listening and or watching. We're out there on all your podcast apps over on YouTube. Check us out if you want to watch the show on our YouTube channel there, SVC Sports Zone. Shayne, but you know, Matt is getting good feedback from last week's show there with practice and talking about some of the things that make it a great practice and you know, I always say so much of it for me is just professional development. I would just encourage all coaches to go back and listen to that one if they haven't already, and not just to hear what we have to say, but to almost walk themselves through the scenario. I think that's what we do here on this show, is just give you an opportunity to be a discussion starter, but then for you to follow along, play along, if you will, to make sure that you're just asking yourself some of these really important questions. You know, tonight's show, Matt, I think we have kind of a fun one. It's as always, there's a leadership angle that we're going to take a little later in the show. First, we're just going to have fun, but we're talking about the regular season versus the postseason, and how the end result seems to be so much, or in this results-driven business, in terms of how all of it plays out and the challenges that leaders have to balance and they face in terms of trying to keep their kids focused. I think last week on the show you mentioned that you may practice 60 or 70 times throughout an entire regular season, and then you're getting into the postseason, and okay, well, you may have a league championship you're trying to win, and then postseason success, and that looks different in every sport. So the first thing, Matt, as I welcome you to the show, I want to give you a chance, as I always do, before I kind of break our show into a couple halves here, just your thought on regular season versus postseason, and what you think this show has to offer tonight for our people listening.
Well, I think when you and I, and like you said last week, and I'll reiterate, we purposely don't do a whole lot of pre-show prep because we want our discussion to be, spontaneous and off the cuff. But the little bit we did discuss this topic, we said, look, postseason is so different in every sport, right? Just the layout of it, not only every sport at the high school level, but like professional sports compared to college, compared to high school, and just everything's different, right? It's a postseason. There's so many different facets to this discussion. I don't even know that we'll be able to touch on all of them, but hopefully we can touch on a lot of them. And then, like you said, you've got the whole thing about how do you handle your regular season compared to postseason, which sports maybe regular season's more important than, and some sports maybe it's less important because of the way the postseason is laid out, right? And so there's a lot of different, I guess, angles we can take. I don't know exactly where you want to start, but I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion just from the standpoint of I guess, to me, what makes for the right type of postseason or right type of tournament or playoffs or whatever.
Well, it's an intriguing point, here locally, when you think about what ties this on, because nationally we're not that far removed from the World Series, right? We're coming up, college football playoff. Every Tuesday night they're releasing their top 4 to 5 to 6, whatever, and then here locally, we just had Adina and Westfall volleyball play for a regional championship, and then Adina went to the Final Four. Coach Smith and her long tradition. I know football wise, they're into the Final Four, Matt, coming up. I'm sorry. By the time this is released, probably almost to the state championship game. I know.
Championship week, yeah.
I know. I know that we've had Coach Bisher on the show before from West Jeff. That's a Final Four team. Coach Bartholomew there at Bloom Carroll. He's had some Huntington and Westfall ties in the past here in the SVC. So, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but my point is, you have all of these fall postseasons. Unioto Soccer went to the state. You have all of these fall postseasons that kind of wrap into winter, and that's a challenge in itself. But then even on the higher levels, as we talked about these other sports, I guess the first thing I would ask is the question, Matt, what makes for your favorite postseason? Okay, so we're not even talking about leadership yet. We're just having some fun sports discussion here. What are the characteristics that you think make for the best postseason? Is it everybody gets a chance? Is it regular season really means something? Just talk me through that process when you think of that.
Yeah, for me, when I look at it, I just tried to simplify it in my own mind, and I said, okay, what postseasons do I have the most fun watching? Just as a fan, let's forget high school for a minute. Even let's just go, college or pro. And the postseasons that I enjoy the most, I think, are the ones where the regular season means something in terms of getting to that postseason. So, like, it's not just like almost everybody gets a chance. I love March Madness. Well, not every college basketball team gets into March Madness, right? You have to earn your way in either through winning your conference. If you're a small school, you've got to win your conference tournament typically, right? If you're a mid-major or small major, if nothing else, you have to have an impressive resume and be selected. And I know that gets controversial, right? But at the end of the day, at least there's some level of criteria, hopefully, and 68 teams out of everybody in the country are getting in, right?
Yeah.
College football playoff, again, one of my favorite things to watch, is that Final Four. And you talk about a sport where the regular season means a lot, right? College football. I mean, you've got every single game matters. I mean, every single game could be an elimination game possibly, right, in your regular season. Now, do I think that, the college football playoff would be just as good with 8 teams? I do. I think you could have at least every winner of the Power 5 in, some wild cards or whatever, to make sure that, you don't leave out an undefeated team or whatever. But at the same time, if you went to 16, or now all of a sudden, does the regular season matter as much, right? So there's that fine line, I guess, Shane. When you ask me what makes a good postseason is, did you earn your way into the postseason? Okay. That, to me, that makes it a little bit better. Or like in the case of a lot of high school sports, most high school sports, right? With the exception of football, where every single team gets in, then do you at least have a system in place to reward the regular season accomplishment, right? Like seeding and things like that. That's, I guess, where I would start with it.
For me, Matt, and as you're talking there, I found myself agreeing with a lot, and then there'd be a couple things you'd say where I'd be, I don't know if I totally follow you all the way to that extreme. I guess for me, I feel like there has to be a path for you to win the ultimate prize if you're good enough or you perform well enough. Okay, so what I mean by that, the reason I think the college football playoffs is nothing short of stupid is because if you are a Division I football team by NCAA standards, and you win every game you play, there has to be another stage that you're allowed to go to prove. Now, do I think whoever wins the MAC is as good as Alabama? No, but I'm saying that there needs to be an opportunity to find out if you are. Does that make sense? Like, to me, college football is in desperate need of another division. They've got to get some of these teams out of there. The difference, say, in a basketball is there is a path for you to win a conference tournament and then to go through the bracket to a Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, and so forth. And, in most years, is the Butlers of the world going to be good enough to compete at the highest level? Probably not. But when they were, they had a chance to go to back-to-back NCAA championships. You see what I'm saying? It's one of those that I guess for me, that's what kind of jumps out at me at the high school level. I know everybody gets in, but again, it's an opportunity that if you are good enough and you can perform at a certain level at the right time, that you will have an opportunity to win your sport's ultimate prize. Yeah, obviously in all the professional sports, you have a criteria through the regular season of qualifying for your postseason. If you're good enough, you can go. If you're a wild card, it may be a harder road, right? So there's a benefit in terms of how you make the postseason. I guess that's how I would summarize it in terms of good. Now, I'll switch gears a little bit and go to another point of like, sometimes the regular season, what makes a good regular season a bad regular season, sometimes is the longevity and how much, I want to be careful what I say here, how much it promotes quitting. I guess basically, like, you know, you'll see in Major League Baseball, the way they go about the regular season, it basically promotes half of Major League Baseball to quit by the middle of July.
Right. By the trade deadline.
Yeah, you'll see the NBA. It's obviously I don't know. I mean, home court advantage is really, really important, but I don't know that being a 3 seed versus a 1 seed or even a 5 seed over a 2 seed is just a deal breaker in winning a championship. In terms of getting in. You know, now in football, you could argue in terms of home field advantage, playing in certain elements, some of those different things. But I guess that's the thing with me is, does the regular season offer competitive environment all the way through? I will give college football that a little bit, but I would also argue that what happens is, take a Clemson this year. You know, I mean, when Clemson loses for the first time, and especially the second time, what's left on the table? Does that make sense? It's very difficult. Florida just fired their coach. Well, Florida's a program that once they lost the second time, you know, what's that mean? Now, you could argue, well, Shayne, that's the case in all sports. If an NFL team gets off to a 2-7 start, they're not going to make the playoffs. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. But for me, I do like having an opportunity to play for it on the field or on the court. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, the Major League Baseball team gets a chance to win enough games. The NFL team gets a chance. The NBA team gets a chance. College basketball, they get a chance. I don't know that that's the case in college football, if I'm being honest. I don't know that you're going to be guaranteed a chance. And that's why I can't buy into that format, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know if I completely agree. I think you and I probably are going to see this a little bit differently with the football thing. Don't get me wrong. I think there needs to be some tweaking to the system. I personally feel like the college football thing, you know, should be probably 8 teams, you know, I definitely feel like if you win a Power 5 conference, that you deserve an opportunity to play in the tournament, and then leave those other 3 spots for your at-larges, like a Cincinnati who has a great year, or, you know, in the past we've had, you know, who was it? Boise one year, and, you know, I mean, you get different teams, but like, I don't know if I'm that interested in football and you know, OU, if they win the MAC, getting a shot to play Alabama. I don't know. You know, like you said, maybe the answer is a different division. You know, for me, I do think there has to be some reward for, like you said, playing the schedule you play and winning a championship, whatever league you're in. But at the same time, you know, football, do you feel like football's maybe the outlier in this sense? You play 1 game a week, so you're limited a little bit in terms of allowing every team. Because, I mean, let's talk about high school for a minute, Shayne. High school football. I mean, let's just explore this for a second. Okay, so 2 years ago, 8 teams got in each region, right? You took there's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 27 to 30 some teams in a region, okay? And 8 teams got in. So you're talking probably a quarter of the teams per region got in. Then all of a sudden, COVID hits. They let everybody in that year because some teams weren't playing a full schedule, whatever. Well, then all of a sudden they expand to 16 teams this year, which starts to put in teams that don't even have winning records, right? I mean, you've got teams that win 4 games get in, and they're going on the road 2 hours away to get their brains beat in by 50 by a team that is the number 1 seed. And you start to ask yourself, okay, now did we stretch this thing so far that it's really watered down? Because football's a sport that's different in the sense of, one, like you said, like I said, you play 1 game a week, so you're going to have to stretch things out on the calendar to add more teams. And 2, there's some safety issues at the high school level involved too. I feel like, there's travel issues. I mean, okay, hey guys, we went 4-6, 5-5. We're going to go play this team that, and you jump on a bus. The school has to pay to transport these kids 2 hours. They get beat terribly bad. A couple guys get hurt. There's a lot of dynamics that go into that, I guess, Shayne. And let's be real honest. I mean, at the high school, and I don't want to get off topic too much, but I'm going to mention this because this ties in a little bit to leadership. I think at the high school level with football, if we're being honest, this was done for financial reasons. Let's just call it what it is, okay? I mean, the OHSA came out and said, oh, we got positive feedback about everybody getting in last year and what an opportunity it is for a kid to get to play in the playoffs. Okay, listen, we're doing this because, and I get it, the OHSA lost a bunch of money with COVID. I mean, and like any other organization, they got to find a way to recoup that. I understand, but let's just call it what it is, okay? We've doubled the prices of sectional tickets. They're charging $10-12 to get into games. We've doubled the amount of football teams that get in. It's a money situation. And I guess my thing is, does it hurt the product? And this is going back to what you're talking about with postseason. Do we get to a point where we hurt the product on the field or on the court by watering it down so much? Like take the Major League Baseball example. You're right. Half the teams quit basically, right, by the trade deadline. What's the answer to that? Because do you all of a sudden now say we're going to let, like the NBA, we're going to let 8 or 9 teams in the playoffs, so you don't even have to finish with a winning record? Because if you do that in baseball, you're going to have teams below 500 making the playoffs, so you don't even have to have a winning record to get in. And is that fair to a team that wins 100 games and has a great regular season? Or how do you make it fair? Do you say, okay, that team gets to play every game at home? Or you understand what I'm getting at? How do you, what's that fine line between making the regular season count, earning your way in, and making it fair to the teams that have performed better all along the way?
Yeah, I think those are all fair points. I think, without getting too far off topic, I think there's some things that you could do in professional sports where, like in baseball, I'd be a huge advocate of first half, second half, where if you win both, you're in. If not, you play it off. I giving some advantage to teams who do, in terms of, home games, more time off, aligning pitching, different things like that.
Right.
Yeah, it might be another show for another night, but there's a lot of things in the regular season where you're right. You want to make it as meaningful as possible, but then at the same time, not losing the integrity of the postseason in terms of finding the champion, and ultimately, I guess you're trying to find the best team. I will say that more times than not, as much as we argue about college football, they probably do find the best or one of the top 2 or 3 teams, at least for sure, in terms of its national champion. There may be some teams that didn't, always get a chance to play or prove it on the field or whatnot. I think as I bring this back to the high school level, the question I had at the top of my notes as I transitioned it to a side of leadership, these are things we have to battle, man. I think at a small school, we look at the regular season maybe in a different way in terms of some schools, and when you have some of those special teams, you probably set your expectations a little differently for the regular season. I guess I'll just start with this question, and then I have several things in my notes I'm going to touch on. But how do you balance regular season success versus the postseason success when you're the leader of a program? You know, from how many games you win in a regular season, a winning season. I know you've had an incredible streak at Vinton County of like 20 some straight winning seasons. League champion versus sectional champion, or league champion versus district champion, that type of thing. What are your thoughts when you think of just Vinton County basketball, of like a successful regular season and then a successful postseason, in terms of how you balance that?
Yeah, I think it's in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. I think our society they reward. I don't know if reward's the right word. They celebrate postseason success more than anything. I mean, think about it. I mean, we celebrate the Super Bowl champion. We don't celebrate the team that wins the NFC East, right? Or we celebrate whoever wins March Madness or the college football play. We celebrate that postseason because the tournament is fun, right, to watch. You got a bracket, you follow it. It's one and done. There's all kinds of pressure on every game, right? It's exciting. Typically, you play it like at the high school level, whether it's basketball, volleyball, you're playing it in a neutral venue eventually, and, where everybody kind of comes together. But I can tell you this, as a coach, I think teams accomplishing great things in the regular season shouldn't be forgotten about. I mean, because if you think about it, is it more impressive, okay, to win, let's say, to win a district championship in basketball, you win 4 games over a period of 3 weeks, let's say, okay? Is it more impressive to do that, or is it more impressive to win 19 games over the course of 3 months? You know what I'm saying? And dealing with everything you have to deal with, injury, sickness, the grind, ups and downs, right? Could you make the argument it's almost as impressive to do that in a regular season, although the thing that's really going to be remembered at the end of the day and celebrated is probably that postseason run, right? People are going to remember your district championship or your regional championship more than they're going to remember your league championship. But I guess as a coach, I think we do take pride in a league championship, or we remember that because we remember the journey. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a journey involved in that we remember. But so as a coach, I guess my answer is I don't know that I juggle them at all. To me, I cherish both of them. I think, if I'm being honest, though, from a public standpoint, what people remember, it's probably postseason. I think postseason probably ends up being the most important thing. You've been a part of, 3 district championships, I think, at Paint Valley in baseball, in a league where it's very difficult for a school your size to win the league, right? I mean, it's a very, very good league, obviously, but yet you've had success winning district championships, and people remember that. So you tell me, what's your opinion on it? How you sort of weigh those things?
Well, the interesting thing is growing up at Uniota and having a ton of league success. And then, like you mentioned at Paint Valley, we've been very, very fortunate to have some postseason success. It does give you different perspective. I think I agree exactly with what you said about postseasons, what people watched last, right? The last thing you see is what you remember.
It's the recency bias, right?
Yeah, man, it just seems unfair sometimes. And I don't know if unfair is the right word or not. It is what it is in sports. But sometimes you'll go, you might see an 18-4 team win a league title and then get upset in the section final, and I'll see people kind of label the year as a failure. And I'll be like, man, that's kind of rough. You know what I mean? Like, fair or not. I mean, obviously that would hurt. If that happened to me, I would have that expectation myself. But I guess when I'm looking at it from, say, a fan perspective or a fellow coach, I'm like, gosh, that's a little rough to label that as a failure. At the same time, you'll see a team that, maybe goes, 6-16, all of a sudden get hot and go and finish district runner up, and people be like, oh, what a great run.
Right.
You know what I mean? Well, wouldn't it be just as fair to say, well, that team might have underachieved a little bit in the overall season. So I guess that's the balance of what you come up with. And I think as a leader, I think the point is, for me, is that all the games matter.
Right.
I mean, if I'm being honest, we kind of talk about in our program, the next game is the biggest game of the year. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
you know, don't start looking at your schedule and highlighting this game and this game and this game, because they all matter. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
win your opener, you're not 4-0. You win your opener, you're 1-0. You know what I mean? They all count the same. So I try. I guess one value, Matt, that I've tried to always implement. I don't try to put any less effort into a scouting report for that non-league game on a random Monday night as I would for a league game where we're playing for first place on, you know, in front of a packed house against a league rival. Does that make sense? I think you truly, as a leader, have to showcase each game as important. Is that kind of a fair way to go about it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's living in the moment, right? The present. I mean, I think that, you know, when you're in a leadership position, if you even at all send out a hint that some games are way more important to you than others, you run the risk of your kids taking opponents lightly. I've always said this. I mean, part of the secret to winning league championships is don't get upset. You know, don't get beat by teams you shouldn't, right? And you know, that's what you're talking about. If you don't treat every opponent the same way and treat every game the same way, you run that risk of either playing down to the level of your competition or whatever. And I think so. Yeah, I think I've never bought into, especially at the high school level, that you can't get excited for every game. You know, you can't tell me as a high school kid or a high school coach, you can't get pumped up 22 times or 27 times or whatever. You know, it's not like 162 times in Major League Baseball. Maybe you don't. I don't know. You know what I mean? I think some players do, and those players maybe are better. But you know, you got to take each and every one, I think, with the same level of seriousness.
Matt, do we use it as a cop out sometimes? You know, I guess there's two schools of thought. I'll throw both of them out there and see what you think. You know, on one end, you know, when you play in a sport where everybody does get a chance. So let's just use basketball since we're in the middle of basketball season right here. Okay,
Right.
Let's say the season's not going the way you want it to go. There is one school of thought of, hey, we're going to continue to get better. We want to be playing our best basketball come tournament time. You hear that in sports all the time, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I'm afraid something that leaders need to kind of look in the mirror and at least make sure that you're not using as a cop out is this excuse, well, we're young, or I'm going to play freshmen, sophomores, and we're going to build for the future. And I'm not sure the message that's sending your locker room, that you're sending your upperclassmen, your culture piece, all of these different things. We talked about in Major League Baseball at the trade deadline. It's almost like you're tanking. It's high school version of tanking, isn't it? Like where do you find a balance there in terms of because I think we've all been guilty of like, well, we're young right now, and you know we're going to build for the future, and we're going to do this and that. To me, I cringe a little bit at that sometimes, because isn't that high school version of tanking or cop out a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on what your definition of future is. If future's 3 weeks down the road for tournament and this is your best chance of winning, that's one thing. But if it's hey, I'm going to play freshmen and sophomores because next year we're going to be good, I think you send a dangerous message, because what you do in that situation is, one, you know, you send a message that even to that group, maybe 2 years down the road, if things aren't going well, we're going to kind of pull the plug on this season and think about the next one. I'm just not a big believer in that. I tell you, when you can prepare for the future is in the off season, okay, or you know, by establishing a winning culture during that season that you hope carries over. Now, again, if your freshmen and sophomores give you the best chance to win right now, then okay, because I think what happens sometimes is, a coach starts a season, okay, and let's just say, you know, he's got a couple seniors that come off the bench, play a role, and, you know, you get halfway through the season, things aren't going well, you don't feel like you're getting production. I think sometimes coaches try something else, not for the future, but for right now. You understand what I'm saying? To try to get better. But I think it depends on the motivation there. I don't at all agree with building for next year. I just don't buy that. I think you've got to compete game in, game out, even if it's tough, even if you're not winning at all. You're teaching life lessons in those situations of hanging in there, handling adversity, and competing. You just don't. You know what I mean? I just don't see that. It's disrespectful to your seniors. It's disrespectful to your program as a whole to just pull the plug and think about, down the road. There's, especially like you said, in sports that have a tournament, because theoretically you get a second season.
Yeah, well, it's funny a little bit. I was thinking of some coaches laughing one time about how, they'd be like, hey, we only won 4 games this year, but we got everybody coming back next year. And I'm thinking if we won 4 games this year, we may not want everybody coming back.
Right.
It's what was it John Cooper used to say at Ohio State? If a dog's going to bite, he'll bite as a pup. It's one of those where let me throw this out you. In Vinton County, you've been very fortunate to enter a lot of years where winning a league championship's a realistic goal. In your last 20 years, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, you probably had a realistic chance to compete in almost 3/4 of those years, and then maybe half the years you did win it. But it's how do you balance that situation when you may only be in January 5th or January 10th and you're out of the league race? You're not going to win the league. Is it just that? Is it that leadership quality of we're going to always put our best foot forward? We're always going to get better. We want to win the next game. 15 wins is better than 13 wins, and we're going to try to be 500, or we're going to try to finish 3rd instead of 6th because that's better. Is it as simple as that? As a leader, is that the mindset? You always have to just be ready to show up to practice the next day and lead your team to be the best version that it can be?
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day that talked about like goal setting, and is it dangerous to set goals if your goals are, well, I want to win the league championship, or we want to win so many games? Because when that goal either is out of reach,
right?
Okay, or let's say, hey, we want to win 17 games, and once you get to 17 games wins and you got 3 games left, then what? It's right. So can you undershoot yourself? But the point was, are those goals? Is that the wrong way to set goals, or do you set goals based on the process? Okay, well, then one theory is, well, that's kind of a cop out. You're afraid that you'll fail. So, hey, if we just set goals on the process, it gives us a bailout. So there's 2 different trains of thought, right? But for me, I always, and I was fortunate, and you'll remember Coach Lovely, our basketball coach in high school, saying this, and I always thought he did a good job with this, and I've tried to copy it. Having short-term and long-term goals, right? Always talking about, like, I can remember him saying, okay, listen, we've got 4 games over the next 2 weeks. Here's what we're looking to accomplish in these 4 games. You know what I mean? We need to, and so, but then you always had this long-term goal too, of we want to win the league. We want to make a tournament run, right? So I guess to answer your question, I think if you're setting goals properly, there's always another goal. It's right. Okay, listen, we're not, okay, look, we're 2-3 in the conference here. Chances are, we might be in trouble winning this league. But, what if we can just take this next 3-week stretch? Okay, can we be the best team in the league this next 3-week stretch, and see where we're at the end of that, right? And then at the end of that, you take a look and you reevaluate. Hey, man, we're playing really well right now. Can we carry this momentum into tournament and have some goals? You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Goals are flexible. They evolve. You can change them. It's not like, hey, we failed, so let's just quit. That's not what it is. You fall short of a goal, you reevaluate, and you set another goal, and you set another target. I mean, isn't that what athletics is, or life for that matter? You just move on to the next thing.
Well, I think success breeds more success. Winning breeds more winning. And I guess that's what bothers me sometimes about the cop-out part of it. Like, take our beloved Cincinnati Reds. Like, think of all the years where, to me, gosh, I could probably think of almost 10 to 12 years of rooting for this team in my lifetime where they almost purposely lost 12, 15, 20 more games than maybe they should have, even if they weren't going to make the playoffs, because, they're going to go to the trade deadline, or, well, they got to cut cost, or, we're going to start getting some young guys up and see what they've got or what. And to me, that doesn't make any sense for the culture you're building. What you're doing is you're just building a culture of losing records for like a decade. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
to me, if things aren't going the way you hope they would go, there's something to be said for a baseball team in high school saying winning, 13 games instead of 8, or a really good
Right.
team that wanted to be great. They maybe fell short, still winning 16, 17 games, even though they didn't win that 21, 22, 23 that they wanted to win. That doesn't mean you just quit and go like 500. You know what I mean? Like it's that's the point I'm making is I just feel like that sometimes we disregard the regular season. We put all of our eggs in the postseason basket. I just don't know if that's healthy competition. I don't know if it sends the right message when you're trying to build a culture of winning for your program, especially at the high school level. But I would even say for fan bases and so forth at the higher levels of sports.
Look, this is one thing you and I agree 100% on. There's just, to me, there is no appropriate time to quit. There just isn't, there's just not. I mean, that's not what sports is about. It's not what anything's about. I mean, it's adjust, it's evolve, it's move on, it's come up with a new plan. It's what can we do to make the situation better? But in no situation is it just okay to tank like you talk about. And I don't care. I know these pro sports, it's a business, and they think somehow it's going to financially behoove them to just throw in the towel. But, it's not, it still doesn't make it what it's supposed to be about, and I think too, and it's what we were talking about earlier. Isn't it the job, of the governing bodies of these sports to come up with ways to make that harder and harder to do, right? Or either, like you said, like your idea in baseball, if you win a first half, second half winner. Now, all of a sudden, if the Pittsburgh Pirates decide to throw in the towel in mid-July, their fan base is like, wait a minute here. You got a clean slate at the All-Star break and you're still not trying? You know what I mean? Wouldn't that put more pressure on ownership and those parties to try? And I think that's where the governing bodies need to make sure when they're running a tournament, they're doing it the right way. It's really important. And I've had some beefs over the years with the OHSAA and some of the things they do with tournaments, because I think it's the governing body's job to make sure that it's fair, that it's ran the right way, and it needs to be well thought out. It needs to be researched. And because, again, if it's not, then you're promoting bad things that you don't want to promote.
Well, it's so funny how these shows come together sometimes, because again, we promise we do not do any show prep really, but man, you led right into my final major point on my notes here, Matt, and that's the overall integrity of the structure of the sport. If I think of Major League Baseball, I think they're in dire need of a salary floor, where if you're going to own a Major League Baseball team, you're going to have to spend $110 million in budget, in payroll or something. There has to be a floor. Like the days of these teams, hey, when this team's spending 200 and you're allowed to just spend like 60, I mean, that's not going to work. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like that's not even being true to the competition of the sport. Right. Same way in high school, the OHSAA. I've said for about 5 years now that sports like baseball, softball, basketball, volleyball, it's time for a fifth division. You know what I mean? In terms of, again, forming a more competitive balance and so forth. That's what scares me a little bit in college. I had in my notes here the transfer portal and the image and likeness. And again, I'm all for people being able to get some things there, but in terms of competition, if you don't think it's going to impact a little bit of the competitive balance. I
Right.
think you're wrong. So I guess that's that part too, Matt, of if all the way down to where if you're a leader of a high school league, if you're the leader of the OHSA or the Southeast District, all the way up into these major sports, in terms of if you're on these committees or you're on these rule governing bodies, these are all the things that factor in. But I think there's something to be said in terms of the integrity of the structure of the sport in terms of lending itself to the most competitive product possible, I guess is the best way to say it.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, you brought up the high school. I mean, doesn't it start for me, okay, at the high school level or college level for that matter, but we'll talk high school here. It has to start with everybody having the same opportunity to in terms of the rules and the fairness. You see what I'm saying? I mean, like, for instance, the public-private debate. Now, we've talked about this on this show before, right? Public school versus private school. And this is always going to be a debate. And I'm sure in a lot of states, but right here in Ohio, you hear it all the time, look, again, let's just call it what it is. Okay. I mean, private schools and public schools, they're not on an equal playing field. Okay. Anybody that thinks they're just not paying attention. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, one school can clearly recruit players because they can recruit people to their school for religious reasons or for academic reasons, even though it could really be for athletic reasons, right? They can offer scholarships. I mean, scholarships. Just think of that word. They can offer scholarships, okay, to come to their school. They can entice you to come there, and yet we walk around. If you ask the OHSA, hey, it's fair for everybody. You know what I mean? Well, it's not. I mean, it's obviously not. So it starts with that. But then I think even beyond that, Shayne, like you say, the structure of, like we talked about the postseason, right? Is the seeding situation correct? Like I heard the other day, I think when the Final Four of football rolled around, and I could be off on this, I'm pretty sure that who you played in the Final Four was based on geography, if I'm not mistaken. Like they took teams that were the closest and played. And why? Because maybe they think that it saves some travel, but we're in a state, like we're not in Texas. We're in a state where you can drive from any corner to the middle of the state in a couple hours. So I don't know why you would, you know what I'm saying, reseed based on geography, because that's unfair. You just happen to be on a map closer to a powerhouse program. You got to play them in the first round, in the semifinals. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's little things like this. It's seeding. It's things that you got to be real careful. Are you putting together the most fair situation you can possibly put together? You said it in the major sports, like a salary floor, right? At least that would come closer to putting everybody on the same level. Some sports do a salary cap, right, in order to try to even out the playing field. There has to be at the basis, that structural level, some integrity for sure.
Well, it's just accountability in terms of holding people accountable for putting their best foot forward. Matt, I guess as I move into final thoughts, I guess I always try to get a takeaway of leadership. Obviously, a lot of this show is just kind of fun sports stuff and
debate,
it's kind of fun things. But from a leadership standpoint, I think the thing I keep coming back to, and the thing I really pull from it, is as leaders. And anything you do and anything you lead, there's always going to be this outside noise. In a year like this in football, when I've seen, what Cincinnati's, been able to do, and I've listened to Luke Fickell talk about all the way through week by week, there's all this outside noise. And what the true focus has to be in terms of our next task at hand. What is it that we are trying to do? And I know it's cliche, but it's cliche because it's true, that you truly have to have a great practice tomorrow. Right. And then you have to have another great practice. Then you have to have a great preparation and then play a great game. And it's just one after the other. And I think that's what this show's really reminded me of, is just the importance of, you can have those things out there that motivate you. Like, as you said, when a season starts, hey, I would like to win the league, or I'd like to, win a section, or I'd like to do this. But really the only thing you can do to win a sectional title right now as a basketball coach, say right here at the beginning of the season, is like, have a great practice tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. And I know that sounds boring. I know it sounds cliche, but it's just true. So that's my final thought, is just understanding and having the patience to live right in the moment and to make sure that you are leading kids, not to let them get too far out in front of themselves.
Yeah, and I think, for me, it would be this, one, I think it's important for every coach, every leader, every school administrator, school district to define their own success. What do you consider successful? And is it postseason accomplishment? Is it regular season accomplishment? Or hopefully, more importantly, is it teaching kids to compete on a day-to-day basis, setting goals, trying to accomplish those goals, trying to come together for one common goal as a unit or a team? I mean, but don't you feel like it's important for the leadership, not just of a team in terms of the coach, but even a school leadership, to send consistent messages of, here's what we think success looks like? And it's not just about wins and losses, but in terms of, hey, look, maybe we're the smallest school in a league and it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough on a league level year in, year out, but we have a tournament that we can compete against schools our size. So maybe we lend a little more to that, and if that's the case, fine. But then don't get on your coach for finishing, second to last in the league. Then let's look at that tournament success. But beyond just that, hopefully we're also setting other goals in terms of how we're just within our approach. You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense, just with the approach of how we attack it day to day. But I guess that would be my final thoughts on it.
That's really good stuff. I hope people enjoyed the entertainment part of the postseason, but at the same time, as always, you end up getting something out of the leadership. It makes you look in the mirror and think about, hey, how do I go about that? How do I prepare my team day to day when it's going well? How do I prepare my team when it's not going real well? So Matt, on that note, we're going to get on out of here, put a capper on show 39 here. Again, if you haven't had a chance to go back and listen to show 38 on practice last week, I think you'll really, really enjoy that. I hope everybody's, we're coming up on the holidays, staying safe and enjoying family. Matt and I will continue to get here in the studio and try to get as many shows put out over the holiday season. If you have a suggestion for a show, look us up there on Twitter or Facebook. You can find me at SBC Sports Zone on all those. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. You can get us on all the podcast apps. If you're listening to us on the podcast apps, you can also go over to YouTube and watch the show. So, Matt, a lot of fun, a couple nice shows here back-to-back weeks as we're getting back at it. Look forward to doing it next week. So on that note, we'll get on out of here, and I appreciate everybody for tuning in this week. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you.